Sophia, a quiet and lonely 3-year-old, lived with her mother, Mrs. Mary, in a small countryside village where time seemed to move more slowly. Their lives were simple, but filled with silent struggles. Since the passing of Sophia's father, Mrs. Mary had worked tirelessly at 2 jobs to support her daughter, often leaving the house early in the morning and returning home late at night. The absence of her mother weighed heavily on Sophia, who spent most of her afternoons alone, with only an old, worn doll once her mother's to keep her company. While other children played and laughed, she remained on the sidelines, watching from a distance, longing for companionship she had never truly known. One particularly scorching afternoon, as the sun cast shimmering waves of heat upon the earth, Sophia sat in the dirt yard, absent-mindedly stroking her doll's faded fabric. Her gaze wandered to the road in front of her house, where she suddenly noticed a figure standing just beyond the gate. It was a pit bull, large and muscular, with dark brown fur dulled by dust and hardship. His deep, tired eyes met hers, and instead of fear, an unfamiliar sense of empathy stirred within her. He stood there in silence, unmoving, as if he carried a story that only she could understand. Curious and unafraid, Sophia approached the gate and reached into her small pocket, pulling out a piece of bread she had saved from lunch. With a gentle toss, she let the bread land near the dog. He eyed it, but made no move to eat. Instead, his gaze remained locked on her, as if he were trying to understand something unspoken. She tilted her head. "What are you doing there?" she asked softly. The dog did not answer, of course, but the moment stretched between them, filled with quiet understanding. Day after day, Sophia found herself drawn to the gate, speaking to the pit bull in hushed tones, finding solace in his silent presence. He never crossed the threshold, never stepped inside until one fateful moment when, with the innocence of a child, she decided to open the gate. Her small hands trembled slightly as she unlatched it. The pit bull did not charge forward but hesitated, studying her. After a long pause, he took a single step inside, then another. Sophia's heart pounded as the large animal approached, yet she did not step back. The moment hung in the air, heavy with an emotion she could not name. Suddenly, the quiet was shattered by a sharp, unexpected noise from the back of the house. The pit bull's ears pricked, his muscles tensed, and in an instant, he lunged towards the source of the sound with breathtaking speed. Sophia watched, frozen in place, as frantic shouting erupted. 2 men burglars who had broken in expecting an empty house bolted from behind the home. The first managed to flee, disappearing into the distance, but the second wasn't as lucky. Before he could escape, the pit bull intercepted him with a force that sent him crashing to the ground. A fierce growl ripped through the air as the dog latched onto the intruder's arm, pinning him down with unyielding strength. The thief screamed, thrashing in desperation, but the pit bull held firm, unwavering in his duty to protect the child who had shown him kindness. The commotion was enough to alert Mrs. Mary, who had left work early that day. As she approached her home, she heard the terrified screams mixed with deep, ferocious barking. Panic seized her, and she rushed into the yard, only to find an enormous pit bull subduing a stranger, while her daughter stood motionless, watching. Mrs. Mary's instincts screamed at her to pull Sophia away, to protect her from this unknown beast, but something made her hesitate. The dog, though powerful and imposing, did not turn on them. He merely held the intruder in place. The police arrived minutes later, guns drawn, but they soon realized they weren't dealing with the dangerous animal. This dog was a hero. As if sensing his job was complete, the pit bull released the thief and stepped back, allowing the officers to take over. Mrs. Mary, still shaking, looked at the dog with a new emotion, not fear, but gratitude. Upon closer inspection, she noticed something that made her heart clench. The pit bull bore scars, deep and old, remnants of a past filled with hardship. He had suffered, he had been abandoned, and yet, despite it all, he had chosen to protect them. Mrs. Mary knew in that moment she couldn't turn her back on him. The next day, she took the dog, whom Sophia had already begun calling Warrior, to the local vet. His scars told a story of mistreatment, but his calm demeanor suggested he had finally found a place where he belonged. Learning that he had once been abandoned by another family, Mrs. Mary made a decision. Warrior would never be abandoned again. He had a home now with them. At first, the neighbors were skeptical. A pit bull living with a child? Whispers of concern spread through the village, but as Warrior's loyalty became undeniable, fear turned into admiration. When the story of his heroic act reached the town mayor, special ceremony was held in his honor. The once feared dog stood beside Sophia as applause filled the town square. The mayor's speech emphasized that loyalty isn't measured by breed, but by heart. And Warrior had the biggest heart of all. As time passed, Sophia and Warrior became inseparable. The little girl who had once been lonely now had a companion who never left her side. She spoke to him as if he understood every word, and in his watchful gaze, she found security she had never known before. Years rolled by, and Warrior aged alongside her. His fur turned gray, his steps slowed, but his devotion never wavered. On the day Warrior finally left this world, Sophia held him close, whispering, "You saved me, Warrior. You always did." Though the pain of losing him was unbearable, she knew his love and loyalty would live on in her heart forever. He had not just been a pet, he had been her guardian, her friend, her family. And even in his absence, his legacy remained, proving that love, once given selflessly, never truly fades. Warrior's story teaches us that the most profound bonds often come from the most unexpected places. His loyalty, bravery, and selfless love serve as a reminder that heroes don't always wear capes sometimes. They have 4 legs, a wagging tail, and a heart full of devotion.